Hello, everyone, and welcome to another guest interview. I have a very special guest with me today. He is the one, the only, the Manderville Man himself, the Purple Baron, Andy Carmona. Cue the Hildebrand music. Annie, how are you doing today?
What's going on, Travis? Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure, sure.
Your content, man. I've been enjoying it lately. It's really good.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So, I think when I first met you on Octagon, I think it was the first match we played together, whenever that was, I think at that time, either your Discord or your Octagon was the Manderville Man. Maybe it was your Discord. So you must obviously love Hildebrand from Final Fantasy XIV. Why do you like Hildebrand so much?
It wasn't more the character in 14 as it was the card itself when it first came out.
Okay.
Yeah, so he was just pretty much an auto-include when a lot of people were running Chantolo as like their main removal, and there's a lot of Earth builds being out there at the time. I believe he was Opus 4, Opus 5.
I think so, yeah, Opus 4.
That was, and like fanfrits were like the hotness, right? So like, you see a lot of water Earth decks, or just like mono Earth decks or mono water decks, things like that.
Yeah.
He was actually one of the more trickier forts to deal with, right? And so before his BFF and Lua came out, it was kind of just like, oh, you have Alcid, Onion Knight, and then now you have Hildebrand to deal with.
Gotcha.
And it was cool. So I did play a lot of Mono Lightning, 2018, 2019. We're not doing that anymore.
I mean, but that's what people know. That's your nickname, right? The Purple Baron, because you're the Mono Lightning player. So what is it about Lightning that you like so much?
Remember when Opus 2 came out? I don't know if you were playing by then.
I wasn't, but I'm aware of what like the game state was by. Yeah, was it Alcid?
That really was the strongest element, aside from just building like a more deck centralized with the Opus 1 Legendary Cloud, who was also like a really, really strong card at the time.
Mm-hmm.
We had just such clean removals, and we did have Alcid, we have Onion Knight, we had Idea, we had Odin. We weren't even using Lightning, but Lightning was an okay option. But you just had so many like cheap and efficient removal that it was so good, and they just kept getting that support, which made it a little bit more and more like better. So then they introduced more haste. They started leaning back from First Strike, although that's where you would see it mostly. Yeah, that's where you mostly saw it, wasn't Lightning. But then they kind of just like tuned it down. You started seeing more haste, and then more removal, more ping damage. But the ping damage was like especially orientated to active forward, so like it was good but not great, as opposed to like fire. But then at the time, fire was the meme, because it's like, oh, here, like, yeah, we'll do damage, but then it's gonna cost you half your deck.
Yeah.
So it never really like ramped up. So for a long time, like Lightning was pretty good. So then when I got into it, I started with the Lightning Ice starter deck, right?
Okay.
I was like, man, this is pretty good, but then I chucked the ice stuff, and I was like, oh, this is better.
Yeah. No, that's great. I've always found Lightning to be very fun to play against as a player. I think Lightning, to me, as a concept and an identity for that element, has a very good balance of it's challenging to play against, but it doesn't feel overwhelming. It doesn't feel like, oh my gosh, I know it likes to target active forwards, so I know that's when my forwards are in danger, when they're in the active state. So yeah, I've always really enjoyed playing against Lightning. And if anyone has seen any of your matches, they know that you pilot it very well, and you've got that Ramu on demand when you need it. So
the Odin EX burst and the Ramu on demand,
exactly,
right?
Yeah, people always say it's Andy. He always has it. No, that's fantastic, man. So speaking of mono Lightning, but more about mono elements in general, and that's why I brought you on here, and it was a great idea you had to talk about. We're in Opus 12 right now. And the hot new kid on the block is these new dual element cards, mono elements. That's so, Opus 8 or something even longer back. You have these new dual element cards, and with new ways of color fixing, the Moogles, Tyro, flashing multiple elements is just getting easier and easier and easier as it goes on. And I think most people would agree that mono, which used to be very viable and used to have very strong contention, mono water, bless my heart, I love that deck. It just doesn't feel as strong these days. So it's kind of what I want to talk about. What's going on with mono?
Well, I think right now what's going on is that the identities of these decks are getting lost with a lot of the mechanics that are being introduced. Some kind of new, some elements doing other things, right? Like, remember when used to be all about reactivating, right? And then it's all about now they have like straight up removal depending on your cost, right? So like Lightning's kind of doing some weird stuff now where it was like, oh, here's like ping damage with like clean removal, but now it's like oh, now we're gonna do like little bits of damage, and some cards don't even like care about the orientation of the cards and stuff like that. And I mean, I feel like right now, like they're transitioning into effects that other colors would do, so kind of like they play well with each other, right? But in general, when it comes to the strength of a mono deck, right, I feel like they're shifting, right? From time to time, they'll start shifting from which element can do it very well, and which element is kind of lacking. And what I'm also seeing is that when you think of like a mono element deck, they're kind of leaning towards tribal now, right?
Yeah.
So now we have Opus 12, and the two dominating mono elements are samurais in fire and dragoons in lightning. And those are pretty much like very viable mono decks that you can play right now. But everything else is like, cool, 3-4 colors, let's go.
Right. Do you like that? So if that's the direction it's going, do you like that, or would you like to see a return of mono that, or do you prefer that? Well, it kind of works if it sticks into tribal, or would you rather see? I'd rather see something more that you're just generic mono lightning deck, because you have cards like Adia that you mentioned earlier. She basically needs to be played in a mono lightning deck because her effect is based off of the amount of lightning backups you have.
Yeah, exactly. So we need effects like that to like justify like, okay, I want to stick with just this color, have these effects kind of go off, and they're a little bit stronger. So like the more recent effect that does something like that is the Ice Crystal Exarch that says, it's, for as many ice backups you have, play something for free with that amount of ice backups, right? So the high ceiling is that you're gonna be able to cheat in a 5-drop for free, right? But on average a 2 to 3 drop.
I love those. Yeah, I love those type of effects. And I remember a buddy and I were discussing in Opus 11. We were talking about Braska's Final Aeon. That card was a big old terror in Opus 11, very strong card. And he was like, I really wish they had restricted this card to fire. That maybe similar to Emperor Zondi, he has to be paid with fire CP, because the problem was, as we saw, people just jammed it into any deck ever, because as long as you had a single fire CP, you were golden. Same with Ritz. Ritz, they legit had a card in fire that, no, I'll fetch out the single Ritz you have in the Lilty backup. And I think a good example of it recently is Orphan is such a neat legend card for ice back from Opus 5. And he reads that, when he enters the field, you dull 2 forwards, but if you control 4 more ice or 5 or more ice characters, he freezes them as well. Same with like Last Swell. So you have these cards that are like, we want to be in mono ice. And then you have something that comes out like Lock, this Ice Wind legend that, I just freeze 2 characters when I enter. And it's just like, well, shoot, that makes Orphan seem like a pile of puke. Like, I know they're not one for one the same, and they do have minor differences, but it's like, so Orphan's got to have a mono ice deck to freeze 2 forwards, and Lock's like, no, I'll just do that to anything on your board I want. So, yeah.
Exactly. He's just like, how many cards did you play? I'll reward you for that.
Exactly.
That's just the strength of a lot of the new cards that come in. So going back to like the mono discussion, it's like we need to see something like that, right? Like, okay, you've built up your back row with so many of the mono element, whatever you're playing, right? Reward yourself for that. Idea used to do it, but now unfortunately that effect isn't as strong. Like it's cool to get like that clean removal, and think about it, like she had the clean removal and it was EX burst, so that's cool. You run the 3 of plus the S ability that said, hey, you've also ramped up this many like lightning elemental backups. Just pay the S, tap all the things that you've invested in, you get to kill something too. So like, you see that one card kind of like it justifies having built the mono element deck, right? So that's kind of like what we need in order to see more strength, but something just like a little bit more broken. I mean, I hate to use that word, but that's kind of what we need to see, right?
But I do think that's a good way to balance a card, is that you can, if this is your power curve, you can make an effect a little above curve, but then the downside is you restrict it to, it has to be in mono ice. Again, it has to be Braska's, it has to be in mono fire, or, Lock, it has to be mono ice, whatever it is. I think that helps balance it out, that like, okay, well, at least you're only going to see it in that deck. One of my favorite cards that unfortunately never got any love was the Opus 8 legend Sakura, where on entry, she just dealt something 8k to an active forward, but you could tap 5 active lightning backups to like just break a forward. It was so cool. I mean, and it was super weak. It only had 4,000 power for some reason. But again, it encouraged you to build that. And as I mentioned earlier, Cagnazzo was such a fun thing to build up with water, or Nicole, like, hey, for every water backup you have, shrink your opponent's forwards by such and such. And gosh knows Cagnazzo coming down, boom, count up all my water guys, was so satisfying. So I think you can have those effects, and you said broken, you can make them stronger, just restrict them to, okay, but it has to be played in this element, which they did for a long time. But again, now you have with these dual element cards, like, oh, I just can go kind of anywhere I want, and I have like all the great effects anyway.
Right. No, I 100% agree with you. And then now, so let's look at, for example, Magisa, who is an Opus. Yeah, it's an Opus 12 card, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it reads that it can bring out. It's restricted, right? It bring out a specific fire 3 CP forward. That's good because you use your own cards to invest in triggering that effect.
Right.
Then the effect costs 0. And then you're sticking your deck with like a bunch of value cards, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like from Forza and Alphanaut are usually the main staple options. And then you want to get a little spicy, you drop Vivi or HM Archangel HM, right? Yeah, or any other option, or Bahamut. The Bahamut also came in Opus 12, who's I'm seeing more and more play of that card, and I think, man, that's a pretty good option.
No, she's a great point. And yeah, like you said, she just came out in Opus 12, and thank goodness they restricted her to fire. Like, what if that card was like, I'll just grab a 3 CP forward? Like, what? That's not any good. No, that's a really great point. So I have a question. So big appeal to me of the mono elements is the fabled anthems. We're talking about Duke Larg, Anacro, Lulu, Waka, Lebro, and then Win, technically Maria, like, just covered everybody. But so those fabled anthems, I love those cards. I don't know what it is about them. There's just something inherently enjoyable about, I got a backup and now all my forwards are just 1k stronger, which always made it funny if like you had a mirror match or even a dual element match. You're like, well, they've got a lock, but my lock's stronger because I've got Duke Larg back there cheering them on. I love those cards, but I've heard some chatter about, I don't know, they're not as good anymore. Like, is that enough reason to play a mono deck? Maybe it's not. So with those anthems, do you think those could use a reprint of maybe, should they get a new version of them that is only 2 CP? Or what if they, God forbid, raised all their forwards by 2,000 power now? Or do you think they're still okay and maybe we should look elsewhere for balancing?
They have their ups and downs, right? The big up is that it's like sometimes that 1,000 that they provide kind of get you out of that range of removal.
Yeah.
Right. That's always been the reason, other than to always be bigger than your opponent's forwards as well. Like that was the other reason you ran it. Like back then it was just like, oh, who's got the stronger forward? This is how we're gonna play eventually. Like you can't answer this. I'm just gonna swing in. I've got good blockers, right?
Yeah.
I think it would be cool to see a little bit more of a stronger anthem. I wouldn't even be opposed for them to be 1 CP higher. Right, so now instead of being a 3 cost, you'd be a 4 cost, but they do just a little bit extra. Maybe I want to say maybe 2,000. But maybe the anthem plus maybe a search ability,
or
also
some
being
other effect that
something.
says, pay 0 and you can choose a water forward. Let's say a new Waka, he's 4 CP, he has his anthem, but he also has, once a turn, you have an action ability for 0 CP, you can buff any water forward by another 1,000 or, whatever effect they've deemed. Yeah, that'd be interesting. That way you still got that anthem power, but it's specifically, cheering them on and pumping them up.
I think that would be cool. So, we increase the cost of it, but then it gives you that one free thing that is unique to that element.
Right. Interesting. No, I like that. That's a neat idea. Yeah, because I love those cards, and like I don't want to see those anthems go anywhere. But I agree. Not many people are playing mono, and with very few exceptions. Like I remember at Worlds, people in the playing category WAF, some people would play Lebro in that because, again, it was so crucial to keep the rain alive. They wanted the rain to be 9k, so he would be out of the range of the enemy Ifrit or anything that was 8k. So that was an example of people playing an Anthem in a dual color deck. But for the most part, people, are only going to put them in the mono decks because that way they benefit all their forwards.
Exactly. Like you want the most bang for your buck, and if you're dropping a 3 CP backup, it's got to be doing something.
Exactly.
Because it's a very slow turn when you're dropping that. That's why they don't feel good right now. Because think about all the backups that you're playing right now. Mm-hmm. They're all doing something, and they're all doing something exceptionally well.
Yeah,
may not be happening right away, but it's either going to recur something from your break zone, right? It's either going to be able to break itself and deal some damage, right? Or it's going to go ahead and search some card inside your deck, as well as color fixing. So when I'm thinking backups, I'm thinking, Samurai backups. I'm thinking Tyro. I'm thinking Althea. I'm thinking Shantotto. All those backups, they're amazing. They do stuff.
Yeah.
Dropping an Anthem now, it's just like, pff, all right, cool.
Yeah. You're just getting backup CP, and like, 'cause if you didn't have a forward on the board, it technically hasn't even done anything for you yet because that forward doesn't have that extra power. Yeah, man, I don't know. I would like to see them do something with that and mono in general, because I think mono is a really neat idea, and it sounds like you've been playing way longer than I have. I jumped in kind of close to the end of Opus 7, but even back then, the appeal to me of mono versus dual was, you won't ever get color locked. And I can say to this day, as much as we've color fixed, I have a category 15 deck that's Earth Lightning, and it's almost perfectly ratioed. It's like 24-26, but there's still a couple times where, I only have all lightning cards in my hand. Like, I can't put down this Earth backup or whatever. So that was always the appeal of mono, is that, you'll never get color locked, and you had things like Cagnazzo, like Orphan, that I felt like I was being rewarded. Hey, you played mono ice? Okay, you're going to get like this extra boost. And I don't know, like, so it feels like that either that boost has disappeared, or, as we kind of alluded to, other cards have come out that have overtaken what once was like, no, this was my ice thing. I needed the mono ice deck for it. Now that other card can do the same thing. I don't know. Does that make any sense?
It does. It's going back to how much these forwards have increased in strength, and how an Anthem just doesn't do what it used to do anymore. That used to be the protection. The increasing it by 1,000 used to be how you kind of protect your forwards. Mm-hmm. Now it's just, they're gonna break to all sorts of weird effects, whether it be I was gonna say a Guido Barrelai loop, but since we can't use that anymore. But a board cleave with Cian, right?
Yeah.
Or, I mean, if you are using Barrelai inside like an ice wind deck or something, and get them to use Fina, and then still board clears in general.
Right.
There are a lot of those that exist. And then you have hard removal, like Alexander, like Famfrit, like those cards still exist, and they don't care about your power. They just go,
right.
You're 4 CP, you're a forward. Please exit the field.
So if you were a card designer, or, if you were on the design team right now and you were trying to balance, would you bring down the power of some of these new forwards that are multi-element and all that, or would you boost the power of more mono cards? And I'm glad you mentioned Crystal Exarch earlier, because I really liked that card. He was really fun to play with. But, thinking about, it doesn't feel like we get a whole lot of those these days. It feels like most cards can kind of go into any deck, other than your Magisa or your Exarch. It feels like there's less and less that say, no, you want to play this in water, you want to play this in ice.
I would increase the power of those dual elements, man, to be honest. I think you should be rewarded. Like, don't get me wrong, like, I want those mono cards to be boosted in power, right? Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, I got it mixed up. The mono cards to be boosted in power. I know the dual color elements, like, they deserve their power, right? You invested, you got it, like, cool, that's that. The mono cards can see a little bit more of power, because, like I said, you're investing in kind of just that solo element, right?
Right.
So we should be able to reward off that, to kind of like keep up with a lot of these, effects that are just pretty crazy. Like, look at the dual element Thancred, right? Like,
yeah.
You have to invest in it, but it pays off, because you're getting, I've seen it get back a mid Previa to get back the Sid Previa, then it gives this guy haste. So now you went from like 0 bodies on board, now you have 3 bodies on board, now he has haste, now he's gonna remove something because you've invested in so many things. So like, it's got that heart of a mono card, right?
Yeah.
In a dual element card, right? So we have the high CP cost, but we have, if it doesn't get Amaterasu, we have the benefit, how it just basically changes the flow of the game from going, well, I'm kind of really far behind, to like, hey, I'm presenting 3 bodies, this can attack, now I have party attack potential, so I can 8k off of mid, I'm getting rid of something with Thancred. Like, it's crazy, right? Like, like the power just explodes. Things like that, right? So we see that in dual element, but maybe we can see it in a mono card as well.
No, that's a great point. I'm really glad you mentioned Thancred. My opinion on that card has changed so much since I saw it. And honestly, it was a card that was just so confusing to at least a lot of the people in my circle, because clearly the potential was there, but again, it was like, well, how do you build around this? Like, do you just kind of invest more in one side over the other? Do you go heavy on the water, heavy on the lightning? But as you mentioned, my buddy Brandon has that mid-Previa, Sid-Previa deck, and he has a very balanced field to where the Thancred comes in, he brings in the mid for free off of 4 water characters, brings in the Sid, haste it, but now he has enough lightning characters to, break a 4 cost or whatever on attack. So, yeah, that one was a very interesting card, because I remember, when I first saw it, it was like, well, you got to go into one or the other, and obviously there is a way to kind of balance him out both ways. But yeah, I've always really liked those effects. When you have so many characters on the field of this element, you get this really good power. So, I hope they do more of that. I don't think we've seen anything for Opus 13 spoiled so far that does that, have we? I can't recall anything.
Not that I know. All I know is that, like, the new Onion Knight, just, shove a bunch of onions in your deck, and it pays off, because being, like, you get that effect off once, and you're practically board clearing, right?
Yeah.
So, it's pretty good.
Absolutely. Well, that's such a... I'm glad you brought up the point about tribals, too, because thinking about that, they do almost... I wonder if that's intentional, that they're maybe trying to push mono towards these tribal cards, but... I miss mono water. I love those mono water days of, and that, like, even the summons. And that was, I guess, what was so interesting about mono water is so much of that deck fed into the amount of water characters you had. The Leviathan, the Cagnazzo, the Nicole.
But you see the difference, right, between, like, a mono deck back then versus a mono deck now, where it's, like I said, it's got to be tribal in order to really be good. The other one is like, okay, all these cards work together pretty well, and then you have a cool combo that kind of benefits off of it, right? Mm-hmm. Like the whole Cagnazzo and everything, right? Back then, like, the mono lightning list was kind of just like, okay, efficient removal.
Right.
It could play aggressive, it could play mid-rangey. I always like playing a little bit of both. Like, hey, if we've got some craziness, let's go ahead and just, like, be really aggressive off of 3 backups, right? Glauca enabled that.
Right.
Before Glauca, it was like, okay, we gotta, here's Al Cid and whatever,
right,
and kind of and Elua, and let's kind of just focus on 3 forwards max, so we don't get blown out, and we have the ability to recover. At the same time, we're gonna be presenting all of our removal. Here's Ramu, here's Odin, here's the backup Seymour.
Yeah.
Whatever it is you have, and a lot of doling effects too. Like, Maya would be able to do that. We have Amon that used to be played in Mono Lightning for a bit. So things like that kind of just, like, scooch the opponent out the way, and then here's some haste, and we're good to go.
Yeah, Glauco is a great example of a boost to Mono Lightning. And he was kind of perfect. He was just this perfect card that he fit in Mono Lightning. He fit with the King's Glaive. He fit in the 15 package just because of his category and everything. But yeah, it was such a nice little boost. Okay, my Lightning Forward specifically, now I'll get cheaper. So in a mono deck, he was really shooting you up there. Yeah, I love that Glauco. That's a great example.
So imagine that being an Anthem card now. That helps you, like, with the mono list, right? Mm-hmm. Imagine that now you have a backup that, instead of increasing all your elemental forwards by this much, reduce the cost of it by this much.
Interesting. Yeah, that'd be interesting.
Wouldn't that be awesome? I think that would be pretty strong too.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I kind of mentioned this with my talk with Matiski about monsters, that I really liked those monster counters that came out in Opus 11. You had these monsters at every, so for example, the lightning one, Skeleton, every time a lightning character enters, you get to put a counter on him. But again, those were kind of geared towards mono, because if you put them in a dual element deck, half your deck isn't going to be feeding into that monster. And they were a neat idea, and I did enjoy playing with those. And I was just like, but I don't know, again, like you said, mono had definitely started to fall off a bit at that point. I don't know, I guess they just never hit that next level I was kind of hoping they would hit. Can we save mono? Do you think it's too late, or are we locked into tri-elements, dual elements forever?
No, you could definitely try it, right? There's just something there. It's just, you have to understand that, like, there are decks that are really strong out there that revolve around, 2 to 3 different colors, because they're all working very well with each other. It's kind of like, it's just in the design of the cards, right? Like, Pyro is a thing.
Yeah.
That means that you're going to get color fixed, which means what you're trying to do in 2 to 3 elements, it's going to work, right? Because once you start investing in Earth CP, you understand that you are now color fixed. You have access to Shantaro, you have access to Tyro, you have access to Kamari.
Well, and because we kind of touched on that earlier, that used to be another advantage or incentive to play mono is, hey, you don't have to worry about getting color locked. That won't be an issue. But because it's become so easy now, since mono has kind of lost that advantage, I wonder if they need to give it something else, maybe what you alluded to, like with the cost reduction, to make up for that. Because at this point, and presumably it's only going to get easier and easier, like I can't imagine going backwards. We're just going to keep getting more we've seen this set already, different combinations of multi-elements. We've got water ice now, we've got water earth, so it's only going to get easier and easier to color fix. So since mono is going to, as an identity, is now basically lost that advantage, they definitely need something else to replace that, because otherwise, what's the incentive? Why would I lock myself into one identity, one set of abilities, when I can play this and get that plus, etc., etc.?
Exactly. So we need something that kind of, like, is Anthem based. It's the reason why you want to dedicate, hey, I'm just gonna use these colors. I know I'm missing out on certain effects here, but I gained something better. You know, I'm gaining this value off of not being, you know, color locked. Although it doesn't really happen with a lot of these dual color decks and things like that. But besides the point, we need something strong, like cost reduction, or something that makes it, like, you know, something a little bit faster that can keep up with how strong these dual tricolor element decks are.
It would be interesting, too, to see something worded somewhat similar to Crystal Exarch in that you could even hard restrict it. So, for example, Orphan says, you know, you need 5 or more ice characters to get his effect off. Well, in theory, you could play a fire-ice deck, get enough ice guys out there, and still make that live, correct? So it'd be interesting to see something like Crystal Exarch, or that even hard restricts that says, hey, if you have any other element on the field, this effect will not work. Like, so almost say, you need to play this in mono. But again, that's a big restriction, but you can then balance. But this effect is, whoo, you know, top of the line, you know, top of the moon stuff. And that's, Exarch doesn't explicitly say you can't have other elements, but he's only going to generate you off of the ice backup. So even if you have fire backups, you know, it's not doing anything for you. I would be very interested to see that, because I would like to see mono make a return.
I would too, man. Like, from time to time, like, I'll play a mono deck, you know, not in like anything competitive, just so I don't lose the edge, so I don't, like, you know, because I miss it from time to time. I'll be messing with all sorts of other stuff, but then, you know, I do have a mono lightning sleeved up and ready to go, always. You know, take that to the bank. I always have that.
Absolutely. I still have fun playing. You know, I'll still play them. I think I have one of every element. I've got a mono lightning, mono water, and even if they don't feel, I don't know, there's just something, I don't know if I can properly put it into words, Andy, but there's just something enjoyable about, I'm always going to draw a water card. Leviathan is, you know, I don't have to count, okay, which ones are my water characters? I'm playing Leviathan, I just count my characters because I know they're all water. Like, I don't know, maybe comforting is the right word. Like, there's some kind of homely, like, oh, mono. It's this nice little blanket. Just give me a hug.
I will tell you, one of the things that I really enjoyed was knowing my deck inside and out. Like, let's say, you know, you build a deck and you understand it, like, you know, obviously, like, you built it. You know the numbers that were in there, right?
Yeah.
But I'm talking like years and years of just constantly playing mono lightning. It got to the point where just like, I know what's left in my deck from, you know, round 3 to round 9, right? Like, let's say, like, I mean, not round, the turns, like turn 3, turn 9, whatever. Like, I see what I'm drawing and I'm just like, I know what's left in my deck. I know how this answers. I know how this interacts with every other deck because I've played the matchup several times over and over and over again. I know what to look out for. I know what to keep. It makes matchup knowledge that much better. But at the same time, you know, you understand that, like, I know this matchup is bad for me. I know I auto lose this matchup. I know I'm very good against this matchup. You know, like, you get that match knowledge as well as the card knowledge, deck knowledge that you constantly keep absorbing. You know, so that's another benefit from kind of just sticking to one deck, one color. You understand your deck just that much more intimate, you know?
That's it. Yeah, that was like poetry, what you just said. Yeah, I was thinking that too. No, but you're right. And like I said, it kind of went into that comforting feeling of like, I just know it. Like, I just know it so well. And I like you said, I could almost predict what I'm going to draw. Or like, okay, I'm probably going to draw one of these 3 things.
I've had several times, and I hated when this happened, where my opponent would hit me for damage, and I go, okay, lose that forward, before flipping it over. And then sure enough, flipping it over, and it's either a Dea or an Odin. The first time, it's cute. When you do it a second time, and it happens to be another Odin or a Dea, that's when your opponent starts looking at you and be like, dude, are you messing with your deck? Like,
right, yeah. You're like, no, I swear.
I've stopped doing that because, you know, like I said, at first it's cute. You know, yeah, I got you. You know, you hit my Odin. But when that keeps happening, it's like, oh, this guy, like, stacks his deck.
Yeah.
So we don't do that anymore.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair. No, dude, that's great.
We can touch up more a little bit about tribals, because I know I mentioned, like, that's kind of like the direction that I see that going. But then, so we've said lightning has dragoons and fire has samurais. What do the other elements have? You know?
Yeah, well, because ninjas are kind of all over. They're in every.
Yeah, ninjas are multicolored. That's
monks are kind of the only one that are still. You know, technically there are some fire monks, but monks are mainly in earth.
Yeah, their sole identity would just be like, hey, this is like bards in ice.
Right. Which
you know, like,
doesn't exist right now.
Like, here's my bard deck, right?
Right.
And then, like, so we're getting another tribal, but it seems multicolored, extremely multicolored, and that's engineers. Yeah, I know you've seen those cards, and we have a bunch of engineers, and they all do some weird but really good effects. and it'll be interesting to see them play well together, because you have like any card named Sid is an engineer, aside from Sid Highwind, who apparently does not exist in Final Fantasy, and we're never gonna able to see that card ever again, right? Weird. But we have anything that has Sid in it, and then even Lid, but like Lid works with lightning cards, but they all have that job engineer. You know, so it's gonna be interesting to see how that plays. The closest thing that I'm thinking of is that, remember Moogles? Moogles had eventually like, you know, the Earth back of this says now your Moogles tap for any color.
Yeah, the Crystal Chronicles Weasel. Yeah.
So we have something like that we could probably look forward to. But once again, that's a multicolor tribal. So those allow you to use little pieces, little cards here and there from like, oh, this in water element's really good. This one in fire is really good. Let's go ahead and pull that into this deck, because now we have access to those elements and we can start using that and see a cool different combination.
Yeah.
As opposed to kind of just like, hey, here's a Dragoon deck. Here's the card, the backup Alice.
Right.
Who says, does your deck have over 40 Dragoons? Cool. Here's an extra card every time.
Right.
Good luck.
Yeah, exactly. And you brought a good point that if they are going to push mono to be into these tribals, they've got to give some of the elements, because like water doesn't have anything. Again, yes, Samurai's is restricted to fire right now, and Monks is mostly in earth, and Dragoons are obviously all in lightning, with, you know, the few like Freya exceptions. But I'm trying, you know, like Warriors of Light is all over the place, Ninjas are all over the place, you know, Summoners are kind of in different decks. Like maybe Summoners was supposed to be Water's thing, but that's not really a tribal, so.
Right, it could be, but that's the thing. There's so much name clashing, and that's kind of like another thing that's really hard to kind of like make a mono deck or anything like outside of like Lightning didn't have that much of an issue, right? You had Idea who showed up in quite different cards. Alcid has 2 cards. He has a backup that's never played before that got overplayed, right? Yeah. Onion Knight is kind of one of those cards that it's kind of all over the place, but he still has his identity within the elements that he's in, right? So you have the Sage version that's you've only seen in Lightning, and you have a bunch of the ninjas in Wind and Fire. His light version. He's a ninja as well.
Yeah, what is his light? I can't remember. I think it might. I don't remember what his light version job is. Can't remember off the top of my head.
I will. You
looking it up
for us? Yeah. Yeah, real quick. I just want to see.
I know it's weird that one has the job change ability, the special ability, but there's only a single Sage Onion Knight, and it's from the very first Opus. They never released another one.
His job is Onion Knight.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, great job.
Yeah,
great job.
Thanks, Square.
But yeah, like that's the only Sage that's been printed. So until they decide, hey, maybe Lightning might want another Sage Onion Knight. You know, I hope it keeps it in the Lightning element. It'll make that Opus 5 legendary one really good, the job change one,
right?
You know, because you could do some real cool shenanigans. That's what I've always liked about the Onion Knight card, you know. So that's kind of like the other tribal that we're gonna see is the Onion Knight, because of that fire green one, the wind one, where it's just like, cool, did you stick like 12 different Onion Knights in your deck? You did it, congratulations.
Right.
Board clear.
That's interesting. Well, I hope they don't lose sight of mono in favor of tribal. Don't get me wrong, I love tribal, and I've very much enjoyed the support it's gotten in the last 2 opuses, but I still would like to see mono become its own thing, that you don't just have to play Dragoons to play mono lightning. You know, you can kind of have that older style of Alcid and Alua and, you know, a new Adia or whatever. So I hope they don't lose sight of that in favor of tribals. Was there anything else you wanted to add, or should we wrap her up?
I think we're good, man. I think we touched up on mono pretty well. It's something that I feel like it's kind of like losing its identity and gaining a new one, kind of like how they're building, right? So they're going from, you kind of like piece together a deck that kind of like works pretty well with each other, and sometimes you have like these cards that work together, like for example Diana and Alba. They're both Warriors of Darkness. Now you don't make a dual colored Warrior of Darkness deck. You could, it just doesn't work that much, but them two alone can stay within a mono list, and they work well together, and they work well with the deck as well, like together. So things like that, where you know you have cards that are part of a tribal, but that little piece, you take that little combo that they're doing, you stick it in your mono list,
right,
and it works, right? So things like that, where you start kind of like deep diving into your list, and then kind of just like, hey, this works, this doesn't work, start fiddling with the numbers. I love that. That for me, that's deck building and then play testing, and just Final Fantasy altogether. That's what I've been doing for years. Unfortunately, now that's changed because they're just not as strong, so now I have to go and just like figure out, oh, this combo and stuff like that. But it's also been very fun to kind of just like go through this avenue of cards that I've never been down before, right?
Right.
And like, how does this interact with this, and I want to build this and do that. And they're not these tier 0 decks or anything like that. Like those are gonna get established right off the bat. Like people are gonna see the most strongest build, the strongest combo, and be like, cool, this is what you want to play. That's what's gonna win you the tournament. Awesome.
Right.
But what do you do on your downtime? I looked at Quancha Queen and I'm just like, hey, this card's pretty cool. Let's pair it with Buckaboo. What pairs go with Buckaboo? You know, oh, this is Ice now. And then we got a card named like Titania who just says, hey, do you have every freaking card type in your break zone?
Yeah.
Cool, play me now on the field. You know, things like that. I like to mess with that now. I feel like for me now, that is the fun part of Final Fantasy. You know?
Absolutely. Well, I hope there comes a day when we can raise the flag of the Purple Baron and be like, all right, here comes this Mono Lightning, and it's gonna be it's gonna shock you if you're not careful. So that's fantastic.
I was able to do an Opus 11. Well, 11.5, right? Like,
yeah.
Was that what we had? No, it was 10.5, then 11. I was able to kind of like figure something out there, but.
Because the Kingsglaive were nice too, and again, they were all in Lightning, so you didn't have to, like, that would have been such a big mistake for them if they had made the Kingsglaive all in different elements, or, maybe some, it's like, no, keep them all in Lightning, so like you said, like Alba and Diana, you don't even have to play them with the other 15 characters, you can just keep them as their own little package.
Yeah, no, they're perfect. I love them.
Yeah.
They do some crazy stuff, and then, so I like that all the 15 stuff fell on Lightning, because I'm probably one of the few people who actually really loved Final Fantasy 15.
Mm-hmm.
Right, it really climbed up the ranks of like the ones that I really, really love, and I'm just like, man, this is awesome. I get to play with like Arnea and Nyx, and like, these are the good cards,
Yeah, I love the 15 deck. That one's I really enjoy that one to play. Yeah, categories. That's its own topic. We'll have to go into that one.
No, you find somebody else for that one.
Right.
I'm good.
Well, Andy, thank you so much for jumping on here and sharing your thoughts with me and your time. It's always a pleasure to talk. Where can people find you if you want to?
Well, if I'm not on the RVA Weekly, just trying out some weird shenanigans deck, I am having network issues that I'm trying to figure out, but a lot of times I do have a schedule on Twitch that I love to be streaming my favorite game, my franchise, Resident Evil.
Nice.
I'm sure sometimes you'll see it, I'm posting it up, I'm just like there. If we're not trying to break the game with some mods and doing some crazy like speedrun trials or something like that, we're just going through I'm just going through like the list of stuff. We'll marathon it. But that's twitch.tv/WarsawZawa. And I do have a YouTube channel, but it's weird. There's a lot of stuff all over the place, but you catch anything from like Digimon to maybe some runs of Resident Evil that I would be doing, some things that I'll be streaming, or sometimes we'll be streaming some Super Smash Brothers or something like that. But yeah, that's kind of like where my online presence is at right now. Like we'll just do a sporadic, if the connection lasts, we're up for like 6 to 8 to 10 hours just doing whatever.
Right. No, that's fantastic. Hey, let us know in the comments too. What is your favorite mono card? What was your favorite mono element too? Because I think everyone at some point was drawn to some mono element. So let us know when you played the most. Probably mono water was kind of the one that had closest spot to my heart, and I love Cagnazzo, so got to give a shout out to him. So thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time. Take care.